All right, everybody, it is almost time. Thank you so much for joining us. We got 277 people here that want to be pen testers, I think, or at least you have some kind of attitude towards it. Attitude, that's not the right word.
Attitude.
I've been talking for
Aptitude.
too long. Oh, yeah.
Aptitude.
All right.
Aptitude. Nice.
It is
That's
1
the word he
o'clock
was
on
looking for.
November 16th, 1 week before Thanksgiving, which is what we talked about during pre-show banter. If you're not going to be on the webcast today, please go backstage. All right, so we got John Malone here. So let's talk about how this webcast came to be. So I generally reach out to all the testers and I was like, is there anything that you would like to teach or share your knowledge? And so John was like, I'd like to talk about this topic of helping people get their careers in pen testing. And then we went back and forth and we're like, well, what about this? What about this? Because we want to make sure we give you the most value we possibly can because you're giving us an hour of your time. And we want to make sure that we're helping you in your career in some way. And so for those of you that are watching, and if you're like, I've always thought about becoming a penetration tester, or I want to know more about offensive security and like how to get into it. Like this is the webcast for you. And so John has a very personal backstory with this. And so John's going to bring his own like, personal stories and things into. But if you are interested in being a penetration tester, please let us know in the Discord chat or in Zoom Q&A, because we'd love to know. And here's the thing. If you're interested in starting your own pen testing company, we actually want you to do that. Start your own pen testing company. We believe there should be more pen testing companies out there. We want more. If you're like competition, we want more companies out there doing this kind of work. So that way the companies that need this kind of work can get it done and they don't have to just have a few options to choose from. They actually have you and many others to choose from. So John, with that said, it is all yours. I'll be backstage. I'll be listening the entire time. If you need anything at all, I'll pop back in. And at the end, we'll do Q&A, or if we see some questions that pop up at some point that would make sense to answer during the middle of his presentation, we'll do that. And so, John, any questions before we get started?
I have none, Jason. Thank you. But one thing that I did want to offer to those who are listening here, like Jason mentioned, this is going to be something that, involves a fair amount of personal stories on my own end. But after this, like if there's anything that you want to talk about, I encourage you to contact me over LinkedIn. I'm always happy to talk with people, and I'm always up for making some new connections. So yeah, feel free to hit me up after this if there's anything you want to talk about, one-on-one.
All right, John, I'll see you. I'll be backstage.
All right. Thanks, Jason. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me for today's webcast. So to start things off, this webcast, like Jason mentioned, is going to be my story of how I became a penetration tester. And we're also going to talk about some things that I learned along the way, which I think ultimately made the difference in getting me to where I am today. All right, so you guys all know my name by now, John Malone. Just a real quick background on my own security experience, though, and I'm going to touch more on some of this stuff as we move through this. But if you want to be technical, the first thing I ever did security-wise, at least professionally, was working in retail. And I know it doesn't sound terribly exciting, but my position in retail involved some management of loss prevention, which at the time, I thought was, hey, just make sure this customer doesn't go outside with, a case of water that we forgot to scan, something like that. It's small, but it was my first actual introduction to some form of security in my professional experience. After that, I moved on and I became a state licensed security officer in the state of Illinois. I did that for a little while, and I also worked with a security firm's human resources center where I was in charge of screening and hiring security officers. Some additional experience, I also worked as a physical security manager after working in those other capacities for some time. And now I'm here with Black Hills Information Security as a penetration tester. Some of my certifications, which are notable, include a 20-hour security training license. That is the security training that I took to become a security officer. I also have a certification called Management of Aggressive Behaviors, which again is more of a physical security thing. I'm also trained in CPR, first aid, AED, and I also have the eLearn Security Junior Penetration Tester Certificate, which, shameless plug, is an absolutely fantastic certification, and which is something I'm going to be talking a little bit about later as we move on through this. So, purpose of this webcast, I want to share my experiences with you guys and also give you some advice just for like things that I've seen, whether that's in job searching or trying to get that initial bit of experience are trying to make meaningful connections that'll ultimately help you move into doing this sort of thing. I also want to talk about advancement and how it's not always linear. People tend to look at the career ladder as something that you constantly climb, but if you fall off of it sometimes, that's not exactly the end of the world, and that also comes to some of its own opportunities. I also want to go into some of my personal, educational and professional wins and failures and how I feel that they ultimately helped shape where I am now, as well as exploring why failure is okay. I found a really nice quote here from Dwayne Johnson, which really sums up, I guess, if you want to think of it, kind of like the whole path to, professional satisfaction. And that's, success isn't always about greatness. It's about consistency. Consistent hard work leads to success, and greatness will come. This was my mindset ever since day one of my journey, and it was a long one. But yeah, we'll get more into that in just a bit. So to get things started, my actual first exposure to technology was when my family bought our first computer. I want to say it was in 1990, I think. And my dad taught me my very first command on that, which was CD \. And the whole purpose of that was so I could play video games on the computer. Hey, I still game sometimes, but I was a kid, wanted to play some games. Family had a cool new toy, so I had to learn how to use it. Little did I know that this first little command of CD \/ would eventually kick off not just a curiosity in me that I had about the terminal and what else it could do. So I guess I ultimately owe a big thanks to my dad for taking the time to teach me that simple command. As I grew up and became a teenager, I eventually got my own computer. It was a very bulky Toshiba laptop. I wish I still had that thing. It must have weighed probably about 9 or 10 pounds. But I used that laptop to learn about the internet and networking. And I also learned about things such as online gaming, file sharing. And eventually I got real curious about how all this works. So I moved towards studying networking, which I signed up for in high school. I took a few courses on that. Speaking of high school, my first exposure to the whole hacky thing was compromising my own high school. To this day, I consider that to be a very bad decision. And yeah, I guess you could say I was young and stupid, but compromising my own high school is, bad of a judgment call as that made was that was my first exposure to what actual pen testing was. Again, bad decision. I would go back and change it if I could, but that's how it is. That's how I learned about, pen testing. After I did that, I got in a lot of trouble, and that's something that I think really turned me off of technology for a long time. I thought it was fun what I did. I thought it was really cool, but I had it drilled into me that, hey, hacking is not a legitimate career field. It's not something that you can submit a job application for and get hired for. And I believed it because at the time, and this is in early 2000s, we didn't really have these big fleshed out cybersecurity programs or pen testing classes that you could just sign up for. So I studied some computer science for a little while in college with the intention of becoming a network administrator. But unfortunately, that was kind of a one-person job, and I had absolutely zero luck finding a job for myself there. So I ended up going back to school to study psychology and business, and that was something I really had to consider or convince myself to like, rather. Wasn't too fond of it, but it was enough to get me out of retail and enter corporate America. I worked there for a while and eventually had a really nice break after my HR internship, which was working for a security provider. That is where I became a security officer and then moved on to working in their HR department. At this point, like, things were looking pretty good. I still had no idea that I was going to be a pen tester, but little did I know that moving through this actually got me some experience which would be valuable for when I was a pen tester, such as, face-to-face time with clients, as well as learning more about security concepts, especially physical security. But yeah, during that time, I did make some really bad professional choices. I decided to step away from that position and try and pursue my own consultancy, which was something that a family member of mine was doing. And I figured that was probably the safest way for me to go. Ended up being a huge mistake. I found myself in a position soon where I was struggling to get clients. I had to settle for a lot of contract work. And at one point, I was even working commissioned sales, selling direct TV and Best Buys. And it was absolutely awful. Needless to say, this helped put a lot of things into perspective for me. And I found myself having a few different drivers come up in my personal life. One of those is, my wife and I were getting ready to welcome our first baby. And I also felt like I had to make up for some lost time just because I spent 6 years of my life getting a bachelor's degree and a master's degree for something that really wasn't cutting it for me. So I figured the safest thing for me to do is to re-enter physical security, but this time I was going to go in with a zero tolerance for personal failure. I was going to succeed at this job regardless of the cost. So during my time at this security company, which is Allied Universal, great place to work for, by the way, my manager invited me to ASIS International, which is a professional association for physical security professionals. During that meeting, I heard about something called penetration testing. And at first I was like, what is that? And why are we talking about it here? I listened to the speaker for a while and he told me this absolutely wild story about how he snuck into a building with lockpicks and some other cool tools, and then he got paid to do it. And I asked him about it after his talk, and he's like, yeah, this is a legitimate career. Security professionals like yourself get paid to, break into buildings. And there's also testers who do stuff with technology. They practice ethical hacking. And right away, like my interest is peak, right? So I asked him more about this. I'm like, so wait, so you mean to tell me people get paid to break into computer systems? And he's like, yeah, legally they do. And I was like, wow, this is putting a whole lot of stuff into perspective for me. I need to go and do that for my career. Otherwise, I'm not going to be happy. Like, that's what I've always wanted to do. So after finding out that that was the thing, I had to give myself a bit of a reality check. Like, my professional background was kind of all over the place. I had not worked in IT for close to 10 years at that point. So there was new sorts of advancements everywhere, stuff with Active Directory. Backtrack had now become Kali Linux, which is something that I had to get my hands on and learn about. But I thought about it, and one of the first things I asked myself is, hey, how can I start getting experience right now to do this job? Because I wasn't in an IT function, I was in a physical security position. So thinking about it, I realized that, hey, I don't have the professional experience to do this sort of thing. People are going to look at my resume and they're going to throw it in the trash. So I immediately thought about what I could do in my current position to start setting myself apart from other candidates, even with the lack of experience. Some of the things that I realized that might be good for me were looking at Hack the Box, Try Hack Me, HackerOne, and all of those other sorts of websites where you can kind of go and learn this stuff, and then dedicating myself to it. Additionally, I realized I'd have to meet some people, and that goes without saying. I want to say pretty much every position I've ever had that was, a decent step in my career involved some sense of networking. And then this one took me a while to come on, but I thought about it and I was like, hey, if you want to work as a red teamer, you're going to be working with clients. So what's stopping me from going outside of my own house and talking to people in my community about doing simple stuff like basic wireless tests, or seeing if the doors on their corporate buildings are secure, just stuff like that. So again, those are plans that I put into action. We're going to go more into those later. But as far as building an actual study plan and learning, I told myself, hey, John, you're going to have to sit back down and you're going to have to pick up the Windows and Linux file systems again, and you're going to have to understand how those work. That's training that, again, shameless shout out to Try Hack Me, but Try Hack Me had some excellent courses on those. I also went to the bookstore, picked out a few books, and started self-teaching myself. Active Directory, that was something that I saw on a lot of open job postings. So I knew I would have to learn that also. And again, that was something that I taught myself primarily based on, reading books, watching YouTube videos, etc. Also, Microsoft now has, I believe it's a free training course for Active Directory, which I highly recommend if you want to ever look that up on Google. I also did some research on pen testing, and I noticed that testers often do like one of three different tests, or at least these appear to be the most, sought out skills in job postings. That's someone who can do an external test, on the public facing internet, or internally test a company's, internal system, or testers who are good at, testing web applications. So I started at that point looking for certifications that would teach me all three of those concepts, and I promised myself that I would earn a certificate within at least a year and a half of starting my studies. As far as standing out where I was at work, I decided to research physical penetration test methods and speak to industry experts, and then go about building my own ideas for physical penetration test policies for the buildings that I oversaw as a physical security manager. I was able to sell the people I reported to on that, and I essentially started doing pen tests of my own building. This eventually turned into me doing pen tests for other locations that we had as well. I also took the time to train my officers on basic concepts at this point. So I would talk to them about some simple stuff, such as, how to pick a lock on a file cabinet or something, or, don't plug in USB drives that you find in the parking lot, just real basic training concepts. Because I found that when I trained other people on these things, it helped me enhance my own learning. Um, let's see. So yeah, at this point, after I'd taken these little steps, I started getting really serious about what I wanted to do. I've actually got one of these here. I had to look for it. I don't know if you guys can see this, but I went and printed out little business cards for myself, and I made it a priority to hand out about 5 of those guys each day, whether it's to a clerk at a gas station, someone I met on public transportation, someone I met at a cybersecurity meetup, anything I could do at all to gain some sort of experience, and it was primarily volunteer work. Can't say I got paid for a whole lot of it, but hey, that's okay. The experience is worth its weight in gold. The other thing I started doing in my off time was streaming on Twitch. I would stream different rooms that I would do on Try Hack Me and Hack the Box, where I would walk viewers through like different attack vectors, and I would kind of narrate out loud about what the lesson was teaching. I also took the time to build a home lab. That's kind of what helped me sharpen my skills a little bit on Active Directory and networking. Speaking of networking, I also did a lot of the other type of networking, which is talking to people. I talked to everybody, and I mean everybody. People I would see outside, people at work. God, I even talked to a trucker who used to drop orders off at a building that I managed, who ended up having like family that worked with another organization's cybersecurity department. I talked to everybody I could to try and find meaningful connections. I also did a lot of bug bounties. HackerOne is an excellent platform for that. I think I committed to doing, I want to say about 10 or 12 bug bounties over my first year, and I was learning this stuff, and I set that as a goal for myself. Lastly, I told myself that I was going to persist no matter what. This is coming from someone who really didn't have a background doing this sort of thing. I knew I'd be hit with tons of rejections, and that's all right. That's something I learned to deal with back when I was doing sales. If people are going to tell you no, that's cool, because eventually you're going to get a yes. And when you get a yes, it's going to change your life. So at this point in time, it had been about a year, I want to say, since I actually started studying this self. And I figured, hey, you know what? I'm doing all of these things, but now I need to actually rebrand myself. So my first step of doing that was deleting my resume. I took it and I threw it in the recycle bin, and I hit the delete button, and I built another one from the ground up that was strictly pen testing related. So regardless of what position I worked, whether it was, doing stuff with loss prevention or physical security, the patrols I did as an officer, anything at all that I could tie back to penetration testing, I put it down. The IT conferences that I went to, rooms that I did on Try Hack Me, certificates that I'd earned along the way, all of it. And by the time I was done, I was happy to see that, like, even though I didn't think I had that much experience, I actually had about a good 2 or 3 years worth of stuff that I could confidently put on my resume and say, hey, this would make me a good pen tester. At that point, by this time, I had earned a certification. The certification that I earned was the EJPT. Absolutely fantastic certification, by the way. But after earning the cert, getting this volunteer experience, and really doing whatever I could to try and rebrand myself professionally, I started networking with people. I know Jason was on here earlier. I was watching Jason's video, which he streams this occasionally. It's job hunting like a hacker. You'll see it sometimes on LinkedIn, but at one point in time, I was in that audience and I watched Jason present. He did such a good job. And I decided to check out the Black Hills website. And I was like, this seems like a really great place to work. So I reached out to Jason. I leaned on my networking skills and I talked to Jason. I first congratulated him on, such a good job that he had done with that stream. And I asked him, if Black Hills was hiring, and Jason helped set me forward on the interview process. That point, there was a technical component before I started working here, but I found that all of the training I had done beforehand had prepared me very well to be successful with, the cyber range, which is a section of the VHIS website that has cyber challenges. Really great thing if you want to check it out. But yeah, ends up everything I'd studied up until that point, everything I'd done through volunteering had helped prepare me for this moment, and it allowed me to pass. So moving on, that's really enough about me, but hopefully that kind of gave you some sort of, I guess, just some sort of breakdown on, I experienced my own failures and, and I fell off the professional ladder a couple of times while trying to move forward, but it ultimately resulted in me being in a good place because I took the time to dedicate myself to what I wanted. So I guess just speaking to everybody here who wants to move into this sort of thing, one of the first things you're going to have to do is be realistic about where you are right now. And I know that's not always easy to do. Sometimes it's easy to, get lost in the big picture of what we want, but we can't really worry about what we want until we truly understand where we are. And as far as understanding what you want, cybersecurity is a huge, it's a huge industry. You've got red team, you've got blue team, and naturally this talk is geared more towards red team. But when you understand what you truly want, as a red teamer or future red teamer rather, you've got to understand, there's things you can do that you have control over that make getting red team experience, I'm not going to say easy, but probably easier than if you wanted to do something blue team related. And again, I'm saying that as someone who went out and, volunteered in the local community and all that other stuff. And I think it's just easier to do those sort of things when you're trying to get into this type of role. But before you start applying and, completely upending, your professional career, wherever that may be right now, it's good to make sure that you have an understanding of what you're getting into. Pen testing is a great field, but you're going to have to be comfortable with doing a lot more stuff than just hacking. Report writing, we talk about that an awful lot. You've got to be ready to write reports, and it's people say, oh, that's boring stuff, but forget about it being boring. Ultimately, when you're done with the test, the only thing your customer is going to have is that report. So if you can say to yourself confidently, hey, I love hacking and I think I'm also going to be comfortable with, doing the reporting thing, then by all means go for it, because ultimately you want to make sure that you're happy at the end of the day. So now that you know where you are and where you want to be, you've got to build a plan to get yourself there. And one of the things that I recommend doing is setting goals for your advancement. Pick a new topic each week, every couple days, every month, whatever speed you feel comfortable with going. Set goals for your advancement and then track your goals and enjoy your gains. Whenever I learn something new, I try and reflect on it at least a couple of times throughout the week just to make sure that I'm, developing some sense of mastery or understanding. And speaking of advancement, I do use that word a lot, but I really think that professional advancement, especially when you're trying to break into something new, can be broken down into 3 different things. And that's technical advancement, or what do I need to learn? Social advancement, who do I need to meet? And professional advancement, which is really starting to pick out those places where you'd want to work. Another important thing is don't neglect what you currently have professionally. Like I said, it's okay to grasp for straws early on. Nobody came into this having all of the experience in the world already, And in my case, I was reaching as far back as my retail days just to mention things like loss prevention on my resume. And if you think about it long enough, you might have skills and experiences that matter. Perhaps your job has you writing extensive reports already. That's technical writing experience. Or perhaps you're like me and, you're working in a physical security position. Security has got you doing patrols out on the brickyard, on third shift. All of that matters because your patrol rounds are going to involve they're going to involve you looking at different ways into a building, checking things like perimeter fencing. All of that stuff matters. And even if you're working with something, say like an office administrative job where you're scheduling things and you're dealing with clients, that's client facing experience. All of that matters too. So again, if you're feeling downhearted or discouraged about moving into something like this, really take inventory of what you've got and think long and hard about it, because chances are you've got things that are applicable and may not realize it. So here, this is the exact plan that I developed for myself in 2020, which is the year that I decided I was going to make a career move. Feel free to steal this for yourselves if you want, but my plan was first and foremost to learn everything I could about the Kali Linux and Windows operating system. Next, I set a goal for myself, which is enter the top 1% of the Try Hack Me leaderboards. I decided to do that because I wanted to show prospective employers that I was very serious about what I was doing and that I was dedicated. I also challenged myself to complete at least 10 bug bounties a year, or during this year. I did that to get myself comfortable working with real world systems, which is something I would not be able to do if I just stuck on sites like, Try Hack Me and Hack the Box. I also promised myself I would make 2 meaningful connections in the industry every week and that I would stay connected with those if they wanted to do so. That way, if there were any job openings or anything, I would have an easy way in, potentially a referral, which would help me make the move that I wanted. I also promised myself that I would obtain a penetration testing certificate to showcase my abilities. And again, that was done for 2 reasons. Firstly, to make sure that, I was confident in my own skills. And then secondly, to show employers that I could do the job and that I was dedicated enough to earn a certificate. After that, I said, hey, I'm going to find a way to use these skills to help my community through volunteering. And again, I've been told that's kind of an odd thing to do in this field, but I figured, hey, not a lot of people are probably doing it. There might be an easy way in for me this way. So I typed up a really simple contract letter, had an attorney look it over, and then I used that to basically sign volunteer deals for myself and get some experience. I also promised myself to be aggressive in pursuing leads for work and striving to be a strong salesman and helper. I know this might sound kind of weird, but oftentimes the difference between getting work and not getting work is your ability to identify someone's pain point. For example, if I'm talking to someone and someone's giving me all this stuff about, hey, my network is slow. I don't feel like my employees are using very secure passwords. I can go and I could talk to that person about all these fancy testing techniques, and they might not get it. But if I take the time to identify that pain spot, which is again, employee password security, and I mention stuff like, hey, I could come in, I could do some password sprays and I can see which passwords, I can compromise or accounts I can compromise. They might be more willing to say, hey, okay, yeah, that sounds good. So being able to identify, pain points and, have at least some basic sales experience probably did help me close some of the deals that helped me get my feet wet. I also told myself that I would celebrate the opportunity to write penetration test reports and CTF walkthroughs. And again, I know reporting for a lot of people isn't the most exciting thing in the world, but what is exciting is getting the opportunity to do that test and write the report. And that's what matters at the end of the day, because that's how you build experience. I also told myself that I would find employment doing what I am passionate for, either on my own or with an amazing firm that accepts me for who I am. Luckily, I ended up finding that amazing firm. Thank you, everybody. But the way I looked at it is that if I kept on this road and I studied as hard as I did and I kept getting jobs, I would either one day I would get the experience I needed to join, a firm like Black Hills, or I would eventually develop a level of expertise and move out on my own. And then the last point is never quitting. During this whole professional journey that I went on, there were times where I was up at 1 a.m. trying to figure out how to do manual SQL injection. And I just wanted to close my computer and be like, hey, forget it, I quit. You know, are there times like really early on before I had like any understanding of Python and I was trying to fix exploits, I'm just there bashing my head against the keyboard. Like there were so many times where I just wanted to throw in the towel and quit. But, you know, I'm glad I didn't, because if I quit, I wouldn't be here right now giving you this webcast. And again, I know this is for a plan for 2024, but this got me into the habit of setting goals for myself. And that's something that I still do for throughout my career. And again, this maybe isn't terribly relevant, but there you have it. I set goals for myself all the time. Highly recommend that all of you do too, especially if there's a huge goal that you want to meet, like moving into testing. So I guess to sum up a lot of this and kind of give you a TLDR. Oh, so someone in Discord says, how do you learn to love web app testing? Well, I can't say I really learned how to love it per se. But it's a need that people have. And as long as it's a need, that alone should be reason enough for you to decide to go out and develop mastery of it. Null Monk here says I get to write the report and don't have to deal with company politics of who, if those changes are All right, so anyway, back on topic. Just some TLDR for everybody here. First and foremost, hold yourself to goals, pursue those goals, and do not quit. 2, be hungry for knowledge and use that knowledge when you obtain it. There is a lot to learn when you move into this industry. There is a lot to learn. Internal, external, and web apps are all completely different beasts. And even with like physical testing, there's plenty of tools you have to learn, things like badge cloning, whatever. But whenever you get new knowledge, take the time to use it. Repeat capture the flag rooms. Even if you've solved them like, 10 times already, go back and do them some more. Drill yourself on what you learn until you can recite these things in your sleep. 3 is be humble and embrace humility. Be thankful for those who help you. The only reason I got to where I am today, granted there was a lot of hard work on my part, but ultimately I had someone who was kind enough to respond to a message that I sent them on LinkedIn. That's great. 4, offer to help anyone you encounter. They may help you one day in return. This is something that I still believe very strongly in. It doesn't matter if you're trying to, advance to a new career or whatever, but help those who you encounter on your journey. You never know. You might help someone today, and then a few months later, they might call you and offer you help when you're looking for work. And then 5, this is something that resounds a lot with me, and I don't know if maybe it makes sense to you guys, but this is something that my dad used to tell me. And he would say, remember that your hard work is never in vain, even when it does not accomplish what you'd hoped for. That was something that I drilled into my head the moment I started pursuing all this, because I told myself, like I said on one of my previous slides, either I was going to find a firm that I could test for, or I was going to do this on my own and open up my own firm. I didn't care what I had to do, but I was going to be successful. So thanks, Dad, for that. So real quick, I do want to jump through some resources or go over some resources that might be of benefit to you if you are looking to develop a new pen testing career for yourself. Firstly, some resources for learning. We have Try Hack Me and Hack the Box. Those are phenomenal. I would recommend Try Hack Me if you're a new beginner. It tends to hold your hand a little bit more and slowly introduce you to some of the different concepts, while Hack the Box on the other hand tends to be more of like a blind testing environment where you're given a box and they just kind of tell you, here, hack this. If you're just learning, I would recommend starting out with Try Hack Me. Try Hack Me also has certificates that you can earn, by the way. So again, if you're just starting out, completing Try Hack Me's modules and getting those certificates for yourself will help, not only will it give you good knowledge, but it might also show some prospective employers that you're very serious about what you're doing. As far as learning, there's also class-based settings. The course that I took was INE's EJPT program. They've got a whole bunch of different certifications, but one of the things that I really like about this, as well as number 4, which is offensive security, and I'm sure there's other testing bodies out there that certify people in this way also, but these are these are more applied testing environments where you're not being tested on book smarts. The test that you're taking actually involves you, breaking into a system or compromising a network. And it's stuff where you actually have to be able to do those things in order to pass. So, and again, like just kind of me speaking from my past HR environment, me personally, I would rather see, a candidate who came up with applied certificates as as opposed to ones that test, book smarts. And again, this is not me saying that Security Plus and all those other certifications are bad by any stretch. If anything, it's more of what you prefer. And again, I prefer hands-on stuff, so I gravitated towards doing the hands-on ones first and then studying for the other stuff like the Sec Plus at a later time. Resources for networking. I'm sure everybody here knows what LinkedIn is, so I don't really have to elaborate on this too much, but I will say don't ignore it. And when you're working on to rebrand yourself professionally, make sure that you pay good attention to your LinkedIn profile. People are going to check you out. Once you start posting, once you start making waves, and once you start engaging with the community, you're going to be getting those views. And when you do get those views, you want to make sure that the people who are looking at you are seeing someone who's really passionate about cybersecurity. My other favorite networking technique is going to in-person meetings or even just talking to people who I see outside. Again, you never know who you're going to meet. And I would always make it a priority to, talk to at least one stranger a day. That was my thing back when I was looking to make a change, but this ended up being a great way for me to break the ice and make some meaningful connections who I still keep in touch with to this day. Third, I would also recommend going to cybersecurity conferences. You can meet all sorts of very smart people at these things. The first and foremost, I just got back from the one that was this year, but Wild West Hacking Fest. Absolutely great convention, as well as ThoughtCon, which I think the last one of those I went to was out in Chicago. But yeah, there's tons of different conferences you can go to. Highly recommend it. Stop at the tables, talk to people, go to talks, go to workshops, and use that as a way to network and make new contacts for yourself. Four, kind of on a similar end, is meetups. I want to say that there's a app that I use on my phone. I think it's called Meetup. You can find cybersecurity, like very informal gatherings on there, and you can go to those. You can talk to other people who are in the field and do some networking for yourself. And then lastly, just some resources for work experience. I've talked to a fair number of recruiters who, source candidates for this sort of thing. And one thing you're starting to see more and more of are employers who actually consider try hack me and hack the box completions as legitimate work experience. So again, I highly recommend going to do those and really staying on top of your ranking. Try to improve it. I know some people say, oh, try hack me is a meme, whatever. But at the end of the day, nobody hits the top 1% by just sitting there, and doing stuff occasionally. So work on your ranking and add that to your overall profile to help rebrand yourself. Second thing is volunteer experience. To this day, I'm very convinced that almost nobody does this. I've had talks just like this one-on-one with quite a significant amount of people from LinkedIn. And everyone I've talked to has always told me, oh, I never thought about doing volunteer pen tests. But again, as cool as this is and as nice of a hack that it is to actually get yourself some experience, you want to make sure that any sort of testing you do, that first of all, it's authorized, that you get your agreement in writing, and consider having an attorney review any sort of contract you do write up just to make sure that you're protected. 3, HackerOne bug bounty platforms. HackerOne is a website where actual companies go and they'll post bug bounties about things that they need checked out. There's other sites too, like BugCrowd, but I highly recommend looking at those and using that as an opportunity to not only test real world infrastructure, but to also write reports, as many of these bug bounty platforms do ask that you submit some sort of report for your finding. Then the last one is capture the flag events. You'll see these all over the place. You'll see them at conventions. I've even seen them hosted at local schools here in the Chicagoland area. But yeah, that's what I would do as far as getting yourself some work experience, especially if you're not already working in a role like this. But yeah, that's about it. Any questions? I see we got one in Discord right now. How can I find a company or organization to volunteer pen test? So that was something that's from Pikachu in Discord. That was one of the things that I ran into. And I eventually figured, hey, the best way for me to do that is just to go out and ask. As weird as it is, just go out and talk to people. You've literally got nothing to lose except for maybe 30 seconds of your time. Hi, Jason. I
Hey,
just saw you pop back in.
yeah, I'm here to help with Q&A, and so is Deb.
Well done, John, by the way.
Yeah. Hey, I got a special thing for, I decided to do it during the webcast, so I didn't think about it ahead of time. So inside Discord right now, I'm going to share my screen and show everyone. Actually, John, go ahead and stop sharing your screen, and then we'll bring up Discord and we'll do Q&A through Discord, because I think we're going to have a lot of questions for the remaining 20 minutes. So for all of you here, let's try to get to all your questions, because today's one of those days where you're like, ask John anything and he won't answer. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share Discord so that way everyone can see it. And then right here, this is a special promotion for today's webcast. If you haven't done the hidden CTF in the first edition of the Infosec Survival Guide, then go to this link right here, type in mixed, and it will give you access to 6 CTF challenges. If you solve 5 of the 6, then you'll get a month of free access to the anti-siphon cyber range. And if you're like, really? Yep. All you gotta do is go to this link, and then right now you're like, what's the link? It's right here. Just go to that link, and you're like, but I'm not on Discord. Well, if you join Discord, get there.
Why?
But I'm at work and I can't do it. It's like, okay, all right. So I'll figure out a way to put it into Zoom, so that way you can grab it from the resources channel. So Ryan, if you could help us put that into the resources channel so that someone can grab that, get to the website, type in the word mixed, and it will give you access to 6 challenges. You do 5 of those 6 challenges and you get a month of access.
Have you tested the link? Because they're saying that it doesn't work.
What?
But your speech
is
it's
IO, not.
Well, you'll
Yeah. All right, let me fix it.
see, put to you.
Yeah.
After all that.
All right. mctf.io/mini
there it is.
dash zine.
It is.
And then that will work now. And then you type in the word mixed, and then you got it. All right. So that gave time for people to come up with questions. So if you have questions for John, please go ahead and ask them. We'll go ahead and bring it up down here. So there we go.
I have a question for you, John.
Sure.
VC said, how did you balance family time? Because you did cover a lot. You covered a lot of like what you did and all the time that it took you. So how did you balance that plus family time?
That is a great question, and I'm happy you asked that. Probably something I should have put in these slides, as I've gotten that one quite a bit. But for me, it was I sat down with my wife and I said, hey, here's what I want to do. Here's when I want to do it by. And I need these days each week from these times completely walled off for me. I understand that means we may not be able to go out as much as we would like, or, that I might have to, stay home during, a, family thing or whatever, but I'm very serious about what I'm doing and I need the time to grow. She was very supportive of that. And I just stuck to a schedule where there is times where, hey, this is my time. I got to make the most of it. The other thing I did, which again, completely your call if you want to do this or not, is I would just wait for everyone else to go to bed, and then I would stay up and not sleep, and I would study then.
It's honest. That's for sure. Yeah.
Here's a question. As a novice pen tester, what do you think about focusing on just a couple tools to start Burp Suite? My feedback, no matter what you're doing, what tools you're using, screenshot and document as you go. Just get used to screenshotting and documenting as you go. Regardless of what tools you're using, get used to that report writing. Regardless of what challenge you solve, get used to the report writing. Just get used to the report writing, because that's the one thing when we do the interviews here at Black Hills, and you'll hear the testers go like, they got the skills to hack, but their example reports are terrible. And so,
because that's what the client is paying for, not for you to hack into them, but the report you give them after. Yeah. So yeah.
All right. So John, what is your answer to that? You're getting started. What are a couple tools to start?
Yeah, I mean, when I started, the very first tool I ever learned how to use was Nmap. I learned it and I used it, and I'd make sure that whenever I was doing a test, even if the say I'm doing a module on like web app testing, right? And the app wants me to go and exploit something inside of the actual browser. Even when I was doing stuff like that, I would make sure to use the tools that I was learning about just to see how they worked on those other boxes. Because, you know, CTFs are a practice environment. You can do pretty much whatever you want on those things. You know, so I guess what I'm just trying to say is repetition is key. If you're learning a tool, you know, great, try and use it on whatever you can, because when you start testing in the real world, that's exactly what you're going to do anyway. You know, I might find a web server somewhere, but you better believe I'm going to at least do a few nmap scans on it too. So I would say, yeah, learn how to use your tools and develop a sense of mastery. I'm trying to find that question in Discord, Jason. Where is that?
Which one?
The one that I was answering. I want to make sure I didn't miss any part of it.
Say, can you see that's not pen tester yet?
Here we go.
It's pretty.
Someone asked, did you attend anything like a Chamber of Commerce event to network and gain business leads?
You know, no, I did not. That would probably be a very solid idea though, as far as like being able to make new connections, and I guess kind of like, you know, as far as like a little time to effort ratio goes, I would think that'd be a very good idea. But no, I did not do that.
Deb, do you see any? How about we?
Yeah.
You find one, I'll find one. You find
All right. Yeah. Let's see.
I see VC says, did you have to adjust your timeline? You set yourself for a year and a half, right? Yeah, that's right. I gave myself a year and a half. Granted, you know, if it took me longer, you know, then it is what it is. But I did everything I could within that year and a half to transition to do what I wanted to do. Favorite tool for taking notes and screenshots?
Yep.
Greenshot.
Greenshot?
Yep.
Okay. We have 450 people here. There was like 500 people here throughout so that's a lot of people who are interested in becoming a penetration tester or a penetration tester who just wanted to hear your insights. So for those of you that are here, like, what are you coming from? Like, so if you want to be a penetration tester, like, where are you coming from to get to be a penetration tester? And John mentioned I have a job hunting live stream, Job Hunt Like a Hacker. So in a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to put in, if you're currently job hunting, I'm going to ask you to put in a special word inside Discord. And you're like, why the Discord? It's because the webcast will end, but the Discord remains. And so that's our way of like, I know like this Zoom session will be gone, but the Discord will be there. And so it's a way for us to connect, stay in touch, to get your questions answered, because you have a lot of questions and this Discord has a lot of people who want to help answer your questions. We are here to support you. We're here to help you. We're here to make sure that you get to where you want to go in your career, because we all were you at some point. And we wanted to make sure that we're giving back to the people who, because at some point, all of us are just, you know, we keep getting older and we need people to replace us. Is that right?
It's just facts. You're right.
Yeah.
It just didn't sound great. You know, no one wants to hear like,
no,
one day you will die.
You're just a man.
Just a man.
Okay. Yeah.
So I do want to, Jason and Zeb, I do want to jump in. Ms. has asked a very important question, which is, how do you fight burnout and imposter syndrome? Yeah. So here's the thing, like imposter syndrome, I find that it never really goes away. Like, honestly, like a lot of the stuff that I started, you know, learning about, like initially, like simple stuff about like TCP IP, I don't say like I get imposter syndrome about that stuff anymore, but as you start learning more and more and more advanced skills, at least for me anyway, I find that my imposter syndrome has now migrated. It's never really gone away. It's just remanifested in the form of more advanced concepts. And then as far as burnout goes, like, get a hobby, you know? Like for me, my hobbies are creative writing and reading. I go through a ton of books each year, and I do that to help myself unwind. Because as good as it is to try harder and, you know, put all this effort into, you know, your move, whatever, that's great. But if you also fail to take care of you, you know, it's not going to be good, you know? So make time for hobbies, make time for family, and then section off time that you want to dedicate to really pushing on this stuff. That way you can go into it with a fresh mind each time.
Question here. This might seem ridiculous, but this is a real question. I can type okay, but I don't touch type, and I'm not. What type of typical pen tester would you look like when typing? All right, I probably shouldn't
You
have
need
read that
help
out loud.
reading that?
Yeah, I am. Like, I have a hard time talking and reading out loud.
Do you want me to take it?
Take it.
All right. I can type okay, but I don't touch type, and I'm not what a typical pen tester would look like when typing. Can you be a successful pen tester without being a touch typer? Any resources for typing you can recommend? Thanks. There you go.
So thank
Yep.
you, Rich, for asking this question. So I want to say that yes, you can be successful. Typing, being able to type, I'm a touch typer, and it's a cool skill. I still get comments from my wife about, oh my God, you type so fast, or I can hear you hammering on the keyboard from 2 floors down. That's great and everything, but one thing that I've found while doing tests is that there's ways to script a lot of stuff that you would want to do. For example, bash scripts. You can create bash scripts for yourself that will help you test or do, more mundane things like doing nmap scans on, a range of IPs and ports, and being able to develop your own tools. Again, if you want to go down that way, I'm not saying you have to be able to, crank out assembly and all this other stuff just to, get a pen testing role, because you really don't. But if you're someone who feels that they're a slow typer, it might be worth looking into like making some simple bash scripts for yourself that you could run.
Great answer.
Do I need to be a network administrator prior to being a pen tester?
No, you do not. And I say that because I went to school to be a network admin and I never got the job, and I became a pen tester anyway. There's plenty of ways to gain experience and to learn those concepts through certification programs and whatnot that will give you, I guess the book smarts. But then as far as like actually getting the experience, that stuff you can do through CTFs, volunteering, certification programs, bug bounties, all that sort of stuff. So to answer your question, I do not believe so. No.
Deb, do you have a question that I might have missed? I saw this question. What should you do after getting your first pen testing job? And I just thought, like, buy a sports car. No.
So
Buy a sports.
so here's what I would say. Continue learning. Once you get your job, don't just suddenly say, hey, I'm going to sign off of Try Hack Me. I'm going to stop watching YouTube videos. I'm going to stop reading cybersecurity news. Don't do any of that. Just keep doing what you're already doing, because you're going to need that knowledge for when you actually start testing. So, and again, like, this is a constantly evolving field. You never want to stop learning. And when you do get a pen testing job, if you have the privilege of working with very smart people, which you likely will, take advantage of those people. Ask questions. You're going to get into this, you're going to get out of this whatever you put in. So again, don't take your foot off the gas. Keep learning.
Yeah. So this question came up, and as someone who's 45, I have thoughts. The one thing about being older and transitioning to a new role is that the one thing you carry with you is wisdom. Like, there's wisdom, and I've made a ton of mistakes, and I've learned from them for like the last 20 years of my career. And so that's the one thing that older people have that younger people don't have. And I know I'm being generalized, but wisdom comes with age. And so when you transition to a new role, you're going to bring that wisdom with you. Younger people have that exuberance, that excitement, all those things. But the older you are, the more wiser you are.
Yeah.
And it's not a binary thing. It's not you're old and wise, but it is wisdom comes with age. John, do you have thoughts to go along with that?
I mean, I really don't. And like this user is saying, like, I'm not 40, but I am in my late 30s, so I made a change at a relatively similar time. And I think that's okay, because if you've been working that entire time, like I said earlier during during the webcast, it's very likely that you have skills that can lead to helping you get into this that you may not immediately think are applicable. Like I said earlier, if you're working in a security position, you're outside doing patrols, like, all of that matters, because that's going to be giving you a foundation for doing like physical testing, if that's something you wanted to go into.
As we're running out of time, I just wanted, if you are currently hunting for a job and you are new to the Discord or you just haven't been to many webcasts before, type in the word hunter into the Discord chat right now, and we're going to give you a job hunter role, which means on Tuesdays when I go live with job hunting, I will mention it, and then that way it will send a message out to everyone that's currently hunting, and so you'll get a chance to show up live if you want to, or watch the recording.
Look at all these guys.
If you take a look at the job hunting chat channel, this is where you can go and get wisdom from others on what's currently working for them, job chatting or job hunting. And there's other people who are doing resume reviews and things like that. So once again, we are here to help you be successful in the career that you want to choose for yourself, because at some point, all of us needed help. All right, here's a question for you, John. Being pen testing, what task would you do more often? Web app pen testing, network pen testing, API, Active Directory? Which one is the most demanding or the most in demand?
I would probably say either, just from what I've seen personally, either web apps, because everyone's got a website nowadays, and those tend to be a really common attack vector as far as like the whole external bit goes. But also internal and Active Directory stuff. Like I've seen a ton of stuff now where people have specific concerns about like their Active Directory environment, and then you go inside and you end up finding all sorts of issues. It's also like when you're testing, like you can almost look at like a network environment kind of like a piece of M&M candy. You'll get that real hard shell on the outside that stops people from getting in, but once you're able to and you get into that internal environment, things tend to be a lot gooier, and there tends to be a significant amount of findings. So
yeah, it's one of the reasons that we created active countermeasures, because over all the pen testing that we did, we're like, oh, hard outer shell, gooey inside. Threat hunting would help find us. Okay, let's see, as we're wrapping up here.
Any particular web pen testing tool? Yeah, Burp Suite's great. Use it all the time. Learn it.
There's a GUI inside me. Yes.
Someone's like, as someone well over 50, I laugh at old being 40.
It's all relative age for sure. Yeah.
All right, John, it's time to wrap up. So what I'd like to do is give you your chance for final thoughts, take all the information that we just did, the questions that you answered, and like, what's the wisest advice you can give on the way out the door? And I know that puts you on the spot, but what's the thing that you would want to tell people as they finish up here today?
So 2 things. Firstly, be persistent and do not stop. The only person who's going to disqualify you straight up is yourself. So it's not going to be someone looking at your resume. You're ultimately the first barrier that you have to pass. Get over your insecurities, pick yourself up, and don't stop trying. The other thing is like, hey, that quote from my dad earlier, hard work may not get you everything that you want, but it's never in vain. You can study this stuff and be rejected a million times, but you know what? By the time you faced that millionth rejection, you might look at all of the skills you have and say, hey, you know what? I don't need anybody else's permission to start doing this stuff. I'm going to open up my own firm. And then you can recognize your success that way.
And my final thoughts are, if you were inspired today, or if you're considering being a pen tester, like either one, you come at some point in the future and come work with us. We currently aren't hiring pen testers, but at some point in the future, come work for us, or start your own firm. Seriously, start your own firm. And if you need help starting your own firm, we're going to do what we can to create webcasts on like, here's how to run a pen testing company. And John has a class that he does on intro to pen testing, where most of it is like, here's all the mistakes I made running a company that does pen testing. So I'm not trying to get you to take a class, but what I'm saying is that we're going to do the best we can to help you be successful in what you want to do. And then if you ever do need a pen test, red team, threat hunt, active SOC, anti-SOC, or any things that we do offer, you always know where to find us. And if you are new here, thanks. Thanks for choosing to spend your time with us today. John, thank you for choosing to share your knowledge and your insights with everyone. I appreciate it. It's your second webcast. We'll love to have you back for a third one next time. And I'm pretty sure you'll pop into Discord at some point and run through some of the questions and see if you missed any and answer them when you can. If you are on Discord, stick around. The webcast will end, but Discord will remain.
Yeah, I'll be on for about, I'd say another half hour answering some questions. So feel free to hit me up.
Yeah. And if you do that secret CTF that I mentioned, good luck. And I hope you solve those 5 challenges so that you get a month of free access to the cyber range. All right, that's it.
That's it. I think we're done.
Yeah.
Done. All done.
Yeah. All right, Ryan, kill it with fire, Ryan. Kill it. Kill it, Ryan.